Welcome to the Hawaii Christian Coalition Reports. I'm your host, Garrett Hashimoto, with a great show today. On my far right, Pat Zikron, Evidence and Answers, regular guests on our program. Bernard Mendonca, right-hand man, board member, and me. Today we're going to address a very controversial subject, primarily because most of the Democratic Party, the contenders, like Bernie Sanders and others, are socialists or talking about socialism for America. And everybody should know, unless they're really dumbed down in schools, that socialism evolves into communism. Yeah, it's a power grab. The government controls you, your money, your thinking, your homes. We just had a program before that government will not allow you to take your children out of certain vaccine programs. So with socialism and today's topic, communism, the government owns you. So Pat, you want to start us off on communism?
Yes, Garrett, one of the concerns that we see in our culture today is, especially amongst the millennials, a growing favoritism towards communism or socialism. And with the popularity of people like Cortez and Bernie Sanders, I think in 20 years ago, we would have never thought a socialist would even have a chance to run for Congress or even hold a seat in our legislature. And now we have one that could be the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. And so why would our young people be embracing a failed system like socialism? For many, it seems to be quite mysterious here, or why, especially for those of us that remember seeing communist China and Russia and Cuba, and now what's going on in Venezuela and the disaster communism is. But when we begin with definitions. What is capitalism? And capitalism is actually, a Marxist term. It was developed by a Marxist in the 1800s, and it was used in a derogatory way of the privileged few controlling and exploiting the poor. But capitalism, in the dictionary definition, it's a term. It refers to private citizens and private corporations owning their possessions or their resources and freedom from the government. And history shows that this is the best economic system, especially for lifting a nation and its people out of poverty. And what is socialism? Well, socialism basically is defined as the government owns everything. Government knows best, supposedly, and government owns and controls everything. There is no private property here, and it arose as a desire to eliminate what was called the class warfare and supposedly make everyone equal and distribute the wealth equally, and as a result we will have a peaceful, eventually, socialism would lead to communism, Marxist ideal philosophy here, where the wealth is equally distributed to everyone and we have a classless, utopian, peaceful society. Of course, his theory didn't match with reality, and that's why communism has been a tremendous failure. But I think we'll be talking about, the reasons why communism fails and why we should not embrace it.
The younger generation, you talk about the millennials and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders just says, we'll just take it from the 1%. But what these millennials don't realize, after they take from the 1%, they come down to the middle class. They take from anybody and anything to whatever their goals and objectives are at that time. That's the bottom line, is when you won't have the freedom to spend your money the way you want. They'll be able to take whatever money they want from whoever they want, bottom line.
Right. There's a misunderstanding. They think in what's called fairness. They say, yes, 1% owns 50% of the wealth in the United States. And they think, well, that's not fair. We need to redistribute that. But rather, you need to change the terms. It's the 1% that creates and manages the wealth. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Michael Forbes and others, they create jobs so that others also can enjoy well-paying jobs and raise themselves out of poverty. So to take wealth away from hardworking people who have earned it and to redistribute it to others who may not have earned it, that's not a fair system. That's not just. Garrett, you know.
Yeah, you know,
owning
this
a
is what I
business.
remember about America. People flooded to America in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Why? Because of capitalism. Because they could come here and work with freedom, like Pat says. They could keep their hard-earned money, you know. Work hard, save your money, educate your children, buy a home. And who made that possible? It was the Rockefellers. It was the Fords who created this big corporation that hired thousands of these people. Yeah, America was built on capitalism. Not, you know, there was a time in America they didn't pay taxes, right? And America prospered so well. You know what happened? All of a sudden we got Social Security, we got this. The government slowly started to, you know, creep in. But listen, folks, America was known for its freedom and capitalism. Earn your money, keep your money, spend your money as you see fit, right?
Yes, and one of the concerns I have as a Christian apologist is that so many Christians are saying socialism is the biblical and the most compassionate model. And unfortunately for many Christians, and I run into a lot of Christians who were there, you know, in the 70s and 80s, and it's, you know, I almost am taken aback when I see them saying, well, socialism is the more compassionate and the biblical model. Well, you're not going to find socialism in the Bible. You're not. The only passage people go to mostly is Acts chapter 4, you know, where it says the Christians in Jerusalem, you know, shared what they had so that no one was in need. Well, first of all, government didn't control their possessions. They willingly shared it. So government wasn't involved in the redistribution of wealth. That's not socialism there. And it's a temporary period where the Christians, you know, as many were coming from Jerusalem for the feast and they came to Christ and remained there, the Christians shared what they had so that no one was in need. But that's a temporary period. You look in the Old and New Testament. For example, Deuteronomy chapter 19, it talks about property rights. And so people own their property according to the Old Testament law. You look at 2 of the 10 commandments. You know, they have to do with property rights. You shall not steal. Well, what's that imply? Well, that implies we own things, right? That's not communism there. You shall not covet your neighbor's possessions. Well, that implies that we own something. And so even in the Old Testament, people own property and their possessions. In the New Testament, Paul talks about a workman is worthy of his wages. You know, that those who work hard, you know, deserve, you know, what they have received. And so there's the incentive there to work. Whoever does not work does not eat, you know, individual responsibility. And so it is not the biblical model. The biblical model is more of a free capitalist system, and it's not the compassionate model. You know, the biblical model, you look, the prosperous farmers were told to leave grain behind, you know, for the poor. So it's out of the prosperity of the successful business people from which charities would develop and charitable systems for the poor would develop. It's, you know, the free market capitalist system that lifts people out of poverty. Charities don't lift a nation or a civilization out of poverty. It's these successful businesses out of their overflow giving to the poor that helps people get out of poverty.
Okay, you know, again, getting back to old America, America was built on biblical principles. That's it. You know, the laws of the Bible were implemented into our Constitution. And like Pat said, everything that says in the Bible, The founders implemented the biblical principles here. So, even in my generation, yeah, I remember all the Japanese getting together, sharing their money. The Chinese too, Filipinos, Portuguese. They all shared because they believe in the principle of hard work. Earn your money, keep your money. What some people talk about Denmark, right, being a socialist. They're not a socialist nation, yeah, but they pay over 60% taxes now. Over 60% taxes. And America, we're getting there. We're getting there. And let's talk about communism. My ex-wife's grandparents, they were very wealthy landowners in South Korea. What happened? The communist North Koreans came in, shot them, took their land. Why? Because you're not supposed to be rich. The land belongs to the people. Yeah, and look at North Korea now. Does the land belong to the people? No. And the people are eating what, tree barks, they said, roots. We don't really know what's the truth there because the government controls the people. Venezuela, how can they be eating zoo animals, right? Mm-hmm. They're eating zoo animals, That's socialism, guys. Greece went bankrupt under socialism. Come on.
Yes, you need to look at where the people are desiring to go. No one is trying to immigrate or get on life rafts and get to North Korea. They're all trying to come to the United States. Why is that? People from Cuba are not getting into life rafts, and people from Florida rather are not trying to get in life rafts and get to Cuba. It's the other way around. The Cubans are all trying to get to Florida.
Shark-infested waters,
yes.
guys.
Yeah, willing to risk life and family, to get to our country. Why is that? It's because, capitalism is more of a biblical system, and it actually works. Now, Garrett, as you know, capitalism only works if the people are morally good.
Correct.
There's got to be a rule of law. Otherwise, if everyone's cheating in business, if everyone's cooking the books, if I'm selling illegal products, well, then the government has to step in and get involved. And the more government gets involved, the more and more you're going to move to a socialist kind of system. That's why, biblical morality and the rule of law is so critical for a nation to remain free. A people can only be free, and history shows this, and our founding fathers warned us of this, that the free people can only be free if they are morally good and can restrain themselves and abide all by a rule of law. If not, then the government is going to have to come in and take control. That's why Marx said, capitalist societies are going to eventually devolve into socialist societies, because he believed that religion, as we advanced, we eventually get rid of religion and God, and as a result then, what is the universal moral law? You won't have one, and government will have to take control. And that's what our founding fathers warned us about, that without God, without religion, Christianity is what they were talking about. You cannot have a free society. That's absolutely vital to a free market capitalist society.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we talk about God. You even have people claim to be Christians and say, why can't I work Walmart and get, I said, if you sweep in the floor, what do you get? Oh, $40 an hour. And a person would say to me, well, you know how much how much money Walmart has. If that's the case, the government will do the same thing. How much do you have, and how much we can take from you? It's I can't even say it's a system. It's a form of greed that will not stop.
Mm-hmm. And look at Hawaii right now. We can talk about it. We talked about the real many times. The mayor said we don't have the money, but we're going to build it anyway. Yeah. So where's the money going to come from? Taxes. Bernie Sanders says everything's free. Nothing's free in this world.
No.
So after, the proposal he makes costs several $trillion. And even the 1% don't have all those $1 trillion. It has to come from the middle class too. So the government, they'll take all your money. They'll take all your money. You can never live in a free utopian society. Wake up, guys. Free education. In the old days, they said, America, you were not built on America. You took the skills from Germany, all other different countries. Why is that? Because they'd rather live in America than in China or in Germany or other places. Those high-skilled doctors were forced to live in dormitories, getting $50 a month. Or they could come to America and make thousands a month. Yeah, Werner von Braun. Good thing we got him here, But like that, they're flocking to America because of freedom and financial freedom. Yeah, and how can you even think about socialism and communism? One good example. I told you about the people getting shot in South Korea. Who's more prosperous, North Korea or South Korea? Who's more prosperous? Not these communists.
Yes, and one of the biblical principles here, and a lot of people talk about fairness, justice. Great, that's a biblical principle. But which system is more fair? You take the money from hard-working people and redistribute it, to others. So, for example, free Medicare, free medical. Well, great. Who's paying for it? I mean, someone's got to pay the doctors. The doctors, nurses have got to make a living. The hospitals and their facilities, someone's got to pay for all that electricity and all the equipment that's there. I mean, it's not free. Someone has to pay for it, all right? And if we say, well, we're going to take from other people, through taxation and provide free Medicare for everyone. Well, a really fair system is that I'm responsible for the services that I use. So if I am using so much electricity, if I am going to get an education, if I'm going to get medical service, then the fair system is that I pay for the services that I require. That's the fairer system, instead of other people paying for me. So we're talking about fairness, talking about justice, biblically correct, the free market system where we're responsible for the services we use. That would be the most just and fair system that's out there.
Yeah, this democratic blanket that Bernie Sanders talks about, everybody is entitled to medical. And you got Mazie Hirono saying the same thing. Everybody's entitled to medical. And they use the term Medicare. We paid into Medicare all the years we've worked. Now they want to use the term Medicare and use that system that we put money in all the years that you and I have worked and categorize it under Medicare and say that everybody will have full coverage, regardless if you worked or didn't work. Now, I don't know if you can go along with that, but I can.
Mm-hmm. I can easily give you an example. Most of the people here today in the United States are okay with their health coverage. They work, they're being paid for by their companies. They're okay. Yeah, it's a lot of the people who don't work, who don't have an income coming in, et cetera, et cetera. But look at Obamacare. He wanted to make basically, to help the poor. I mean, everybody gets health care. What happened? Pat Zuckeron's, went up by what? How many percent? Right? And you're paying for somebody.
Right.
You're not paying
Yes.
for yourself, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so is that fair? Huh?
Yeah, and even the ones that could pay, their rate went up 200% and 300%.
That's what I mean. That's Pat. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so nothing's free, guys.
And one of the failures of socialism is that it fails to understand human nature. Marx got his understanding of human nature, from an atheistic position, but the biblical position, one of the greatest things that allows humans to strive and reach their full potential, is incentive, and socialism completely ignores incentive, which is the primary drive in many, in all human beings, the desire to get better, to improve our situation. For example, if you go to these communist countries, and I've been to many of these countries, they're all living in the ghetto. Why is that? I don't own my house. Why do I want to fix it up? I don't own it. Why do, they live in apartments and in condominiums, and they're ghettos. Why improve it? I don't own it. Why should I invest my money, in improving my living situation when I don't own it? And so they're just living in terrible conditions, and we wonder why. Whereas here in the United States, it's more of a biblical model. We own our property. So why would I want to? Well, because I live there and I own it. And so you look at the American neighborhoods where people own their property. These are much nicer neighborhoods. And if someone is not taking care of their property, we're going to get on their case because we own that property and we're responsible for it. Whereas if you go to public housing where it's free, nobody owns their housing, it's much lower conditions because there's no incentive to improve and take care of it. And that's what you see in these communist countries. What incentive is there for me to improve and get education, get a high-risk kind of job like a nuclear physicist or something, when I can make the same amount, as a, I don't want to be derogatory or anything, but a janitor, or just a public worker, let's say. I mean, what incentive is there? So that's one of the great failures of communism there. And there's a biblical principle: a workman is worthy of his wages, 1 Timothy 5:18. So the Bible has a greater understanding of human nature, something Marx failed to understand.
Talking about America, Pat just mentioned janitors. In America, a janitor, a shoe shine guy, could become a millionaire. Okay, he could own several properties. Where else in the world can you do that, guys? Because you got your freedom. Shoe shine boys became millionaires because they saved their money. They didn't squander it needlessly. And today, look at America. Our athletes are overpaid, man. $20 million a year. Come on, sportscasters, $10 million a year. What's going on? Yeah, and we want to change that into a socialist nation. Come on. Bernie Sanders is a communist at heart. Yeah, you don't take away money from hardworking people, and you don't say the rich stole the money. You never say that. Yeah, just think of it. Would you like your taxes go up to 80%? You keep 20% to feed your children, pay your mortgage. That's what you're going to get with socialism. Yeah, and then next will be communism. The power group, the government will control you. Will control you. Yeah.
Yes, and history shows us, that socialism is a great failure. It's a complete disaster. Look at, in recent times, look at Venezuela. One of the most prosperous countries in the world with tremendous oil supply. I think they're in the top 5, Now look at them. They're one of the, in just less than 10 years, became one of the poorest countries out there. Whereas the other countries who went the other way, they're beginning to prosper. China, in certain pockets of China, like Shanghai and others, people know, communism or socialism pretty much has died. Just the government is socialist. But as far as economics, they're free market capitalists. And look at the prosperity that nation is having. India, once they moved towards that model, millions came out of poverty. All right? Whereas countries that went the other way, like Venezuela, went into poverty. Sweden's another great example. In the 70s, they were one of the most prosperous nations in the world. Then they began to experiment with socialism in the 80s, and they declined very quickly. They experimented with socialism for about 20 years, and then guess what? they realized the failure of the system and they made many reforms. They went back to private health care. They went back to a free market capitalist system. They reduced their taxes. They reduced the size of government. And they're one of the most prosperous nations today. And although Bernie Sanders and Cortez and others will say Sweden's a democratic socialist country, they are not. Okay? They're a free market capitalist country. And another thing to realize, in communist systems, not everyone lives equally. Those with the power, they have all the money. Putin is worth over 100 billion, many think. That's more than Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. And so the biblical model is more of a free market system, and that's the compassionate and more biblical model. I hope people understand that.
People of Hawaii, please start asking a question. This big question, it's not about Republican, it's not about Democrat, it's not about party. Where are your morals and values? Stand on them.
Okay, this has been the Hawaii Christian Coalition Reports. I hope this has been an informative program for you. But you cannot equate socialism and capitalism. I mean, it's socialism so bad. It's so bad. I don't know why we're even talking about it, yeah? But again, people, it's who we put over us as leaders. Yeah, the Bible says choose 5, 10, 50, hundreds, of moral leaders who fear God. Today, oh man, I can count on my hand some God-fearing legislators, I believe. And we got to get back to Christian values, guys. Don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't kill. Yeah? But the most important thing, work hard and be able to keep your money. Keep your money if you work hard. And don't let it go to waste. Throw the pros after swines. This has been the Hawaii Christian Coalition Reports. I'm your host, Garrett Hashimoto. We'll be back next week with another great program for you. Until then, God bless you and thank you for tuning in.